Welcome to the Rusted Garden Homestead. Today in our seed starting series I'm going to talk about watering. When do you water? How do you water? Lighting. How long do you leave the lights on? When do you cut the lighting back? How many hours do you need to have the lights off? And I'm going to talk about fertilizing, some basics about fertilizing, but I'm also going to show you how I set up my seed starting mix using worm castings. The worm castings I use are from Vermis Terra. And I mentioned in other videos, you don't have to fertilize your seed starting mix right away, but you can. And when you do that, that means you don't have to fertilize it as the plants are developing. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. I'm also going to show you how I'm using this foil in here. But let's just start up top real quick and I'll show you what's going on. I use the shiny side of the foil to make a flap, and it just drops down and that reflects the light back. I do duct tape the edges. That just makes it more durable so that you can lift it up. Whenever you do a flap like this, it's great to put duct tape along there. And that will reflect the light back in. And you can see I have my peppers starting. They're starting to break through. And I think that's Coreopsis, white yarrow. And I'm still just waiting on other things to germinate. Germination is going to take anywhere from 5 to 28 days, depending on the different varieties of plants that you're growing. And let's go down here because it's a better example. The best way to tell if your seedlings need water is when the top's dry and you go to the natural color of your starting mix without water. And here's a really great example. You can see this one has water, how dark it is. These have dried. When they turn brown like that, within a day to 3 days, depending on the size of your container, you're going to have to water it. And I'll show you how I do that in the video. But as it dries on the top, again I want to stress this, I did talk about this in the last couple videos, when the top dries it helps reduce fungus gnats, molds, and problems because water needs to be up there. But as these cells dry, it dries on the top, there's plenty of moisture down here and they dry down this way. So even though the top is dry, there's moisture in here for your seed starts, your transplants. Give them a day or so to dry out completely up here and then we're going to bottom water. Let's see if I can find another example. These are peppers that aren't coming out yet. They should be popping in a couple of days. And you know, we have a light cell there, a dark cell there. No, there we go. So you can see that they dry at different speeds. It's going to depend on your lights. It's going to depend on how close your lights are to them. And that's why I can't tell you exactly how often or how many days to wait before watering, because it's going to vary. It's going to vary too on the size of the cells that you're starting your plants in. These are much bigger. Okay, that's how you get some idea of when your seed trays, your seedlings need to be watered. Here is another way that I use foil. You can put the shiny side down right on top and that will help reflect light down. It also helps contain the heat around there. Now a lot of people say, well, are you going to get burn marks on your plant when the light reflects from the foil to your plants? And the answer is no, you're not going to get that with these type of lights. People also say, well, shouldn't you use white? White's a better reflector. If you're growing plants in the house, you want white walls, you want white to help reflect the light around. For seed starts, in the distance right here, reflective foil is perfectly fine. Foil, if it gets wet, doesn't get damaged. That's why I like to use it. Let's pull this tray out. These are a lot of my peppers. They've all popped. What's the date? That's on 1/28. So it took about 8 days for these to go. The peppers are right along here. They're overseeded. We're going to thin them down. The tomatoes back here are doing really well. But these aren't how I seed start my tomatoes. I put a bunch of seeds in here because I'm really testing for germination for the seeds that I sell in my seed shop, and they're all doing really well. And these are going to be experimental tomatoes. I'm going to actually cleanse the soil with hydrogen peroxide, and I'll show you how I do that in another video. And actually, let's take this tray out because that's the tray I'll bottom water with. There are 2 sets of lights in here, 4 bulbs. Now let's talk a little bit about the lighting. Let's take this one up here. So this is why I like putting the duct tape on there, because the foil's then more durable. Lettuces, we got oregano back there. some peppers. So lighting, this is a question I get a lot. So let's start with the basics I've answered. You want your grow lights to be 2 to 4 inches above your seed starts when they're breaking the surface. It's all going to depend on how intense your lights are. One way to figure out is, of course, start with 2 inches, put your hand under there. If it gets way too warm, then you need to raise it a little bit because you don't want to overheat your seedlings. That's rarely going to happen with the LED bulbs and with the fluorescent lights, but it's possible, so just double check. Also depends on the lumens value. If your lumens value is 2100, you're going to probably have to be closer to the seed start tray. If you get some of the modern LEDs and you have 5000 lumens, then you're going to probably be able to raise these to 4 to 6 inches. It all depends on your lights. So just, kind of experiment, trial and error, you'll figure it out. But the way to protect yourself is when your seeds are first planted, you're waiting for germination, put them a little bit closer than you think. So what I do is I put the seeds in, let them sit in the dark for 3 days. Nothing really germinates in 3 days. And then after 3 days, I put the lights on timers. I put them on for 16 hours. You want intense light hitting your plants that are going to break the surface. That'll stop them from being leggy. And then you want to leave that 16 hours on 5 to 7 days while your plants break the surface, establish, and send out their true leaves. I'll talk about true leaves in another video. That 5 to 7 days is enough to give them the light they want. They stop growing towards the light. They're not going to get tall and leggy, and then they start establishing themselves. After that 5 to 7 days, you can cut the lights back to 14 hours. You can do that for a week or two, and then you can cut them back to 12 hours after that. As the plants grow over the weeks, the intensity of light is a little more forgiving than at germination. So you always do this on a 24-hour cycle. So if you leave these on for 16 hours, you have 8 hours of darkness. If you leave them on for 14 hours, you have 10 hours of darkness. 12 hours light, 12 hours darkness. Same thing. You can even probably get down to 10 hours as these get bigger. And you can also raise the lights higher, 6-8 inches above them, when you have nicely grown seed starts that have been growing 3, 4, 5 weeks. All depends on the variety. But that's how I basically take care of the lighting for all my plants, and I will move them around. Like I might have a shelf. Well, I do have a shelf, not in this video, but in another place where these lights are much higher, and that's where my more mature transplants go. All right, let me set up the watering. I'll show you how I bottom water and talk a little bit more about that, and then we'll get to fertilizing. So I definitely recommend watering from the bottom. You can water from the top if you want, but there's no need to wet your seedlings, your transplants, splash the soil around. It can cause more problems, and it just takes too much time to water across the top. You can do that if you want, but I'd rather save time. Now, I already put in 2 10-ounce, 12-ounce cups of water in here, and what you do is obviously you take out one side, and this is cup number 3. And you just fill up the tray. It's probably, could use just one more, so you're going to need 3 or 4 cups depending on how quickly your plants start drinking up the water. And you're only trying to go maybe a quarter of the way at the most. With practice, you figure it out and you get the right amount of water in there so that the trays, the cells in here will absorb all the water, the starting mix will absorb all the water, and you have nothing left in there. And you can tell when everything looks dark like this, then all your cells have enough water in it. Now in a perfect world, everything would dry out equally the same way. Like these are all dry over here. The ones where the plants haven't germinated yet are still dark. That makes sense. And then the ones where the peppers have germinated, it's like 50-50. Nothing's perfect. So when you start seeing a group dry out, that's when you want to put in 3 or 4 cups, 10 to 12 ounces of water. That should be enough. You can always add more. After these have been sitting here for about 30 minutes, you can dump out the excess water. They're not going to really absorb more water after 30 minutes. You can leave the water in there for a couple of hours, but don't leave it in there for a full day or longer. Some people think, well, if I just leave the water in there, it'll get what I need. What'll happen is you'll end up getting root rot, so you don't want to do that. So hydrate your seed start cells, 30 minutes, couple of hours, dump out the excess water if there's any excess water. Let me just think real quick if there's anything else. I mean, that's pretty much the standard for watering. It's hygienic, water from the bottom. You'll get less problems up top by doing it this way, and it's going to save you a lot of time. All right, let's talk about feeding and getting to setting up a starting mix with worm castings. The worm castings that I use are from Vermisterra. The reason I work with them and I have an affiliation with them is because pound per pound you get worm castings in this product. A lot of products, and this is just FYI, check them out. You get a lot of compost and there are worm castings in here. The worm castings from Vermisterra are aged 7 to 10 years. They are sifted and you get castings. You're not getting compost and castings, you're getting worm castings. I really, really do recommend them. Now, for seed starting mix, in my other video you might have seen that I didn't put anything into the starting mix. And the reason being is you don't have to, you're going to have to feed your plants later, but if I do a video and I'm putting all these different amendments in here and you're just getting started with gardening, it can be overwhelming. You can just use plain old starting mix to get your plants growing. The seed coat, as I mentioned before, has nutrients in it. It will get your plants going. And we'll talk about fertilizing your plants if you don't use any seed starting mix in the beginning and how you do that over the growth of your transplants. But I prefer to set this up with worm castings, and the reason being, I talked in the other video also, if you put in, because there is no soil life in your starting mix, there's nothing in here, there's no microbes, nothing that's going to break down organic matter. If you put in straight bone meal, blood meal, other organic fertilizers that don't have any microbes in it, any kind of soil life in it, that organic fertilizer just sits in here. It will mold, it will get fungus. It's not necessarily bad. It may even start to smell, but there's no soil life to break that down and put it into a form that your plants can use. That's why I prefer worm castings. I call it the end product of nature because it's the castings from the worms. It doesn't smell, it's all broken down, it is in a form that your plants can use. It has growth hormones, it has microbes in there, it has everything your seed starts need. So if you're going to use anything, I recommend worm castings. Now you're going to take 1 cup. This is 1 cup of the premium worm castings. You can use their standard version if you want. There is about 6 quarts of starting mix in there. So I use 1 cup to 6 quarts. So in your regular big bag of Jiffy's starting mix, that is 12 quarts. You could use up to 2 cups. You could use a little bit less if you want to. And this, I believe it's a 10-pound bag, will go a long way for your seed starts and probably could even last a couple of years. But you're just going to sprinkle in your worm castings just like that. Now, do that after you've used the either boiling water method to sterilize your starting mix or that you've microwaved it. So you hydrate your starting mix first, either with boiling water to kill out any of the fungus gnats that I mentioned in other videos, or that you microwaved it. Don't put in the worm castings or any fertilizer for that, for the matter of fact, and then put it in boiling water. Do it afterwards. And you're just going to mix the worm castings in there. That is plenty of nutrients to last several weeks of growth for your plants. So you can go ahead and put the castings in now. You just set the starting mix up as I showed you in other videos. And it's just a perfect way to get nutrients to your plants how nature intended it. Okay, if you don't want to use worm castings and you want to use other organic fertilizer to set up your seed starting mix, go ahead and pick up a bag of any organic fertilizer, but like I was saying, they don't have soil life. So there are certain organic fertilizers that will have a whole list of the different microbes they introduce into their starting mix. So you want that mixed in with the organic fertilizer so that when you put it into your starting mix, you're also putting in microbes. The microbes start to grow, they break down the organic fertilizer. So that's the key. Use worm castings because they have the soil life in there, the microbes in there, or buy a bag of organic fertilizer that also has microbes in there. And you'll be able to tell when you read the package, it'll say right on there. Now when you use the organic fertilizers, I'm not sure of the exact ratio, But I again would recommend use less in your starting mix, at least by half, by quarter, than it says to use out in the gardens in your containers. You just don't need that much for your seed starts. Hope you enjoyed the video. It gives you some ideas of how to water. Oh, let's real quick, as we were sitting there talking, here's the tray that we put water in, and it's been about 30 minutes for the whole setup and everything that I was doing. So that will get dumped out. Everything is nice and dark, so I used a little bit too much water, but that's all you have to do. And make sure that you water your plants on a flat surface so the water doesn't pull in any direction. All right, thanks for watching, and again, hope it gives you some idea of how to water your plants, how to use the lighting with your plants as they develop and grow, how you may use foil to help kind of reflect light back in, and using worm castings in this manner is a great way to set up your starting mix so that your plants do really, really well indoors. Thanks for watching. Please check out my seed shop at www.therustedgarden.com, and all these seed starting cells and everything that you see me use, I do sell there. Thanks for watching.